We will reconvene the public hearing and continue with the speakers. Mr. Mullen, will you like the title of the ordinance? I know.
All right, everyone.
That's not hers.
Hello, everyone. If you don't mind, if we could take down the volume a little bit, we're going to continue with the speakers right now. Thank you so much. Just to keep the meeting moving forward, that'd be great. Thank you very much. We're going to continue with our speakers, please.
Hi, my name's Linda Stanley. I am a retired military officer who served in Iraq, served my country for over 20 years, saved my money for a house in San Diego, found Fire Mountain, a very unique neighborhood in Oceanside. The reason I bought there was because of the community and the environment and the larger lots, that people weren't on top of one another. I have a half an acre, a 1922, was built in 1922. Most of my house was on the easement, and I had to redo my plans several times because I had 3 feet of new construction on my property that was in the easement. I followed the laws of the land, which I've always done. This man talked about there's no adverse impact on this. Adverse impact is an unwanted, unanticipated result of taking a particular action. There is adverse impact in this. There's things that can't be measured in numbers and money. It's psychological health. The health of all of us in this neighborhood. I sat in one of the Cole houses. It looks directly in their bathroom, all of those houses. The safety impact, I live on Ridgeway in California. I am almost killed every day coming out of my driveway. There's not only 2 schools, I hope you're listening, there's 3. And there's going to be 4. The church has a school. There's a preschool. There's 2 churches. I can't even get out of my neighborhood sometimes. This is about money. This isn't about providing low-income housing. Please, if this was your neighborhood, you would be up here with us. It's not right for Fire Mountain, and it's not right to provide 2 low-income houses at the detrimental of all of these people. Thank you.
Joan Bachman, Seaside Neighborhood. As you know, neighborhoods all over town are pretty upset. You saw the SOAR initiative earlier. The horrible hotel is not going away, as you know. We are still fighting that. And now you have this neighborhood. We need to be saving our single-family neighborhoods, and we need the council and the city to be working with us to do that. The Coast Highway vision right here showed that Coast Highway is this big, long commercial thing, and it fails. Successful commercial is very short, and you need to break it up. The zoning on Oceanside Boulevard to Crouch is solid commercial. It is failing. Puppy Mill, the horrible gun place, the dollar store, and now we're going to get a brand new Big Lots, yay. Here's the problem. You've seen this before. This is the map of commercial sprawl. As you can see right there on Oceanside Boulevard, it's solid. Coast Highway is solid. We have to fix this. The city did a vision for 9 of these people that were there in 2007 are here tonight, or were. These principles clearly state everything I'm talking about. It is in the Oceanside Boulevard vision. These are pictures of what Oceanside Boulevard could look like. That's the Sprinter coming down, that's Oceanside Boulevard. Then you see the Loma Alta Creek with housing. And here's our solution. We need to break up all of that commercial. We need to concentrate it into the 4 areas that are near State Tree Drive and South and Oceanside Boulevard. Right there, we need to complete the grid. We need to put in more residential. We can have affordable housing. We have plenty of space for affordable housing. Hopefully on Monday, or the next Planning Commission meeting, they'll solve the problem, which is one of the principles of the uncontrolled parking and all of that up in the Union Plaza area. So we could get this happening now. We need the city to work with us, and let's stop all this development that's destroying our neighborhood and start to work on solutions like this. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kim Conley, and I live on Grandview across the street from Cole Way. I've been asked to read a letter from one of our neighbors who was not able to attend today, Mr. Steve Einen. He lives behind Cole. There is an easement down there with a few houses that sit on just west, I guess, of the proposed project. What he states is basically everything we've already heard today, and I know you guys are tired of hearing it. It's rote. We're saying the same thing over and over again, but we're hoping that you get it. There is a safety issue for the residents. It's one way in, one way out on a cliff that, and I agree, I don't know how a fire truck is ever going to be able to get in there with all the people trying to get out. It's safety because of the traffic. There's traffic everywhere, and this is just adding to it. You're telling us, oh, there's 2 cars per house, and nobody has, I mean, if they have 2 cars, great, but most people have 3. There's too many cars. The parking is going to spill out. We already know that. School children are not safe now. It's going to be worse. Why are we putting it here? With the new high school coming in, you've got high school students, and we never want to be around a high school driver. So, and I live right across the street from this development. I believe we do need housing. I get it. But there are certain spots for it, and you don't try to put a square peg in a round hole. It's just not a good fit. If you want to put 5 custom homes back there, have at it. That's a great idea. We're all for it. We'll be up here with posters for that, but not this. And I think that you haven't heard one person say, yay, it's just a bad idea, and we hope you veto it.
Our next 4 speakers are Sally Bickerton, Lita Esposito, O'Neill Straub, and Jeffrey Bledsoe Lacey.
Hello again, Sally Bickerton. I'm a 40-year resident and homeowner in Seaside neighborhood, but I felt compelled to come tonight and stand with my Fire Mountain neighbors to oppose the Grandview Point development for many reasons. And I hope that you will vote against this. They're asking for too many exceptions, and it just does not fit in the surrounding neighborhood. We need to protect all our single-family neighborhoods, 10,000 square foot lots that are found everywhere in this area. We need to not ignore the semi-rural atmosphere that's so unique to Fire Mountain. We should not be allowing exceptions that cluster large houses on very small lots with very small setbacks. We should not allow a density bonus in a neighborhood of large single-family homes, and we need to maintain those large lot sizes. It really makes a difference. And I hope that you will listen to the neighbors. Please listen, because this is your neighbors, your residents, speaking, and hoping that you will really pay attention. Thank you.
All right, I think I'm a little out of order. Jeffrey Bledsoe Lacey. I live at 1404 Denise Circle. This is a little personal to me because I live across the street from a vacant lot that's been surveyed twice in the last month. It's just about a half mile away from this project. And that's kind of the problem here, is that this will set a precedent for all of Oceanside. And the problem with that is that the state upon high is telling us how to use our city, about controlling all of this land. This is about us putting 500 homes in Fire Mountain or them just putting 1,500. And this law says there's nothing you can do about it. Our planning commission don't care. Our general plan don't care. The aggregate of projects like this in Fire Mountain, where there's a lot of large lots where you could buy and subdivide and put in 2 little units, and suddenly we have all these extra homes in there, all that extra traffic for very limited egress and ingress. And that's going to be a problem in the aggregate. And that's why we have a planning commission. So I'm here just to summarize what everybody here is saying, that this is a fight worth fighting. We're asking you to go to court, challenge this, bring it up. A law is a law until it's not, and we see that all the time in the news. We have to challenge this for the development and plan of our own city. Yes, we may lose, but it's a fight worth fighting, and it is worth the cost. Maybe you have to pay the attorney's fees, but that is enough to decide what we're going to do with our city, and to have fought the fight, to challenge this law that is telling us what to do with our land use that we do not agree with. And your own staff is saying they don't like this, they wouldn't do it, but you have to. And you, City Council, don't have any choice about it. We need to go to court and challenge this. Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Mayor, councilmen, people. My name is O'Neill Straub. I am a resident on Grandview. I live directly adjacent to the project. I own a house at 1914. I am the outlier here because I am for the project. Some of the reasons are that he's going to bring a sewer into the area that will allow me and several other of my neighbors to connect to the sewer line. We are currently on septic, and there's no way to renew the septic, no way to add on to the house, no way to get a private easement up to the sewer, as the neighbor above is the Colway people have already got a bunch of easements, and the neighbor that we'd get the easement from has said he doesn't want any more. On top of that, I think that a lot of the complaints have been about the traffic, and the traffic there is existing traffic. Another 100 cars is going to be a drop in the bucket. I can stand there for 15 minutes and see 100 cars go by. So, I didn't laugh at any of you guys. The other item is that, just listening to Mr. Lacey, it's a big problem in the state. Not enough housing. We're being forced to have more housing. And unfortunately, that's because everything that comes that's a little bit more dense than we want or are used to, we try to get it shut down. So now the state is shoving it down our throats. It could get worse. This project is actually relatively close to a traffic corridor, with the Sprinter being right there and a big street that leads right to the freeway. Most of the traffic and the dangerous roads are existing. Unfortunately, when the Colway project went in, they didn't even put a sidewalk, which would have helped. What they're complaining about is no way to walk. Thank you. I'm for the project.
Good evening, council members. My name is Lita Esposito. I live on View Street in Fire Mountain. I've lived in Fire Mountain for 17 years. I'm a lifelong runner. And one of the things I love most about my neighborhood is when I go out for my runs, I see my neighbors. They're out walking with their families, riding bikes with their families, going for runs themselves. Recently, I was on Grandview running west towards Hunsacker. And though I had the right of way and there was a stop sign, I was almost hit by a car. So close that I actually put my hand out, touched the car, and was able to push myself off the car. The car immediately took off. And from that point on, I decided when I come to that area, I need to cross the street so I can be safer. Every time I've done that, I have seen very similar kinds of stops. You know, this is the wrong project at the wrong time. No one's against progress. We're for progress, but it must take wisdom. And this is not a wise decision. Just because there may have been impact studies not showing accidents does not mean this area is not dangerous. As a middle school teacher, I see students all the time bolt across streets just to meet up with friends or cut their walk short. This is going to not be good with the high density traffic that's going to be brought to this area. So I urge you, please use wisdom in your decision and not vote for this project. Thank you.
Our next speakers are Cindy Rocco, Rhiannon Henry, and Megan Buchek.
Hi, Cindy Rocco, South Oceanside, Honorable Mayor and Council. I have two aspects to bring your attention to tonight, and one of them is, according to the law, as it's written, that there are 3 rentable units on the property, and what's going to happen is, and they are deemed as low income if you continue to read through the law, and those are going to be demolished, and the people will be displaced, who are probably lower income people, and then you're going to go ahead and replace that. So you're creating a displacement, and you have 3 units right now on the lot that are affordable, that are not being replaced. So because of that, you can actually outright deny the project if it's presented without the replacement units and an affordable deed restriction on those 3 units. That's separate from the 2 ADUs that are being built. So we could deny the project. Otherwise, also is, the question is that slope, the 20-degree slope, buildable or unbuildable? If it's built, the calculations were done based on that 20-degree slope. That was the acreage that was used. But the builder's not building on that, he's clustering. So it's either a buildable slope or an unbuildable slope. If it's buildable, then if you build the project with the 26 units and the ADUs, then you don't have to have all those constricting setbacks. And if you don't, then you need to recalculate your density calculations based solely on usable land. So if you're going to take out the 40-degree slope and mark it unusable, also right-of-ways and also detention basins, and then take out this 20-degree slope area, then you're left with 2.64 acres, and that is the basis of the calculations. Thank you.
Yes, hello, my name is Megan Buchek, and I live on Avocado Road. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but I really felt I needed to come up and talk to you about the safety of our neighborhood and the roads. It's very narrow, very curvy. I am not on Grandview, but everyone that will be living there, I assume they're going to go to Walmart and Stater Brothers and everything else, and they're going to come driving right down through those curvy, narrow roads. I have a personal experience with that. My husband is crippled and my dog is in a wheelchair due to being hit while walking through our neighborhood. So it is a safety concern, and I've lived there 20 years, I've seen all the lots fill in, and they haven't been too bad, 2 houses here, 3 there. You see incremental traffic, but this is a lot of houses, a lot of cars, and it's just not a safe neighborhood to have high-density building. I also wanted to state that if you do give this exception, then you are opening the doors for all of the remaining lots in that neighborhood, and it cannot sustain that much vehicle traffic through it. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you vote against this. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Rhiannon Henry. I'm a medical practitioner and a 30-year resident of Oceanside. I'm here standing with my community. I was also not intending on speaking this evening, but given the incredible passion of our community, I have been inspired to do so. I was a student at Lincoln Middle School and Palmquist Elementary School. I know exactly what it's like to walk around those neighborhoods, and I know what it's like to walk from Grandview to what is now the Sprinter station. It's a very steep hill. It's not exactly accessible. Our community does not have a team of lawyers. We don't have a team of accountants, and we don't have a beautiful presentation that was put together by a very beautiful woman. But we do have a voice, and I ask you to stand with us, stand with those who have voted you into this council and who don't stand to make money from this project. Thank you.
This public hearing item, we've called for it, everyone who's turned in forms, but people who have not turned in forms yet and wish to speak still have time to do so. Mr. Knott.
Yes, Mayor, council members, Jimmy Knott, 127 Cherry Lane. After listening to everyone, I have two questions for staff. One is about traffic accidents, and that is, are insurance companies and auto repair or body repair facilities required to report any and all accidents to OPD? If not, why not? I think that would give you a little bit more input onto the true reflection of accidents in Oceanside. Second thing is if this project or any housing project goes through in the city of Oceanside and a homeowner buys a home, in a single-family home, after they build and everything else, doesn't the homeowner have a right to build an accessory dwelling unit on that property? And if they do, why aren't those figures projected into the potential outcome in all figures that are projected? Because that would take an increase by potentially 1/3 to 1/2 to even double. So I would like to get some answers on that. Thank you.
Mayor Weiss, I see no more speakers on this item. There is 12 minutes of rebuttal from the appellant, if they wish to use that time right now.
Good evening. My name is Lee Andelin. I work with the development team for the project proponent. I'll preface my specific rebuttals by saying this. What we've just heard is exactly why the density bonus law exists. California has a massive housing shortage, and that's been found by the state legislature, and this is one of the ways that the state is trying to deal with it. The problem is that anytime someone comes in with a development of any significant size, you get all the neighborhood coming out and saying, well, we're not anti-development, but we don't want this development in our backyard. And you see that over and over again. And so what the state did was it took most of the discretion out of the hands of the local municipality. And the law is very clear. If you meet the elements of the density bonus law, then you're entitled to build the project. Concerns about, being out of character for the neighborhood, too dense, those kinds of things are not within the discretion of the approval process. I'd like to address first the rental issue that's been brought up. And I would note that this was not addressed below, and so we're at a little bit of a disadvantage here, not having been able to gather a lot of evidence to rebut this, but it's only a rebuttable presumption that a percentage of the existing units are low income. Let's look at this unit. This is about 4,200 square feet. The monthly rent is a total of over $3,500 per month. It seems unlikely that the person who's renting that, who also drives a Land Rover, and it's a couple, so the threshold for low income is $62,300. It seems it's actually only one unit. The other unit is illegal.
If you could please restrain from commenting while he does his rebuttal, thank you.
So this is one unit, $3,500 of rent per month. I don't think that qualifies as a low income unit. So if we run through the numbers, in the existing units, and this was in the staff report, there's a total of 6 bedrooms. And the rebuttable presumption in the statute says that the lower income renter households occupied in these units, it's assumed that the lower income renter households occupy these units in the same proportion as the percentage of lower income renter households in the city overall. We used a percentage of 46. I understand it's actually 42%. So you multiply those 6 bedrooms times that percentage and you get 2.76 bedrooms that we're required to replace. You always round up when you're doing numbers under the density bonus statute, so that rounds up to 3. 3 bedrooms that must be replaced by low-income restricted units. The proposed project has 6, 2 units of 3 bedrooms each. Therefore, it more than meets the legal requirement. But even if we considered all 6 bedrooms that exist, it does replace all of those 6 bedrooms and therefore meets the threshold of the statute. But my only point is that we actually exceed the threshold of the statute. There was a point brought up about effect on historical properties. I think it was conceded by the commenters that these properties are not on the historical registry. The statute is very clear that only effects on adverse impact on any real property that is listed in the California Register of Historical Resources. None of these properties in the vicinity are actually registered, therefore that's legally irrelevant. We haven't seen any evidence to support any specific adverse impact. We've seen a lot of sky is falling predictions, but there's no evidence in the record, and we don't believe that that would withstand a court challenge. The traffic issues were studied up and down, left and right. The traffic study was much more thorough than has been suggested by the commenters. The traffic was studied for a 24-hour period and then another 24-hour period. That was the first study. Then the traffic engineers went back to confirm that and studied again for 2 24-hour periods. So, it wasn't cherry picking, it wasn't a casual study, but it was very thorough. Also, what hasn't been mentioned is that there will be mitigation of the traffic. We can't address the specifics of that yet because that comes after project approval, and we work with the city traffic engineers, and basically they tell us what we need to do for traffic mitigation, and so that will be part of the project. Finally, there was some mention about the area and what should be included. The statute is very clear that the area that's considered as the denominator for the density bonus calculation is the gross area. And we actually could have included all 7 acres in that calculation. And we could have built legally 34 units. This is 28 units, which is less than the maximum that's allowed under the black letter language of the statute. Finally, accessory dwelling units were mentioned. There's no basis for including that in any calculation. I don't think you see in this kind of neighborhood every house putting up an accessory dwelling unit, and I'm not sure it would be physically practical. But anyway, those are my comments. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Okay.
Well, he stole a lot of my presentation, so good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is David Meyer with DCM Properties, and our firm was engaged late in this project because we are density bonus experts. I've been involved in the density bonus law since 2001, AB 1866 by Assemblymember Wright, and have been working in Sacramento ever since in refining the density bonus law. I think, as you've probably heard tonight from your staff, who Actually, I must compliment them on, because in general, I'm called in to usually counsel staff and or correct staff when they interpret the law incorrectly. In this case, I have to compliment them. I think everything they've said tonight quoted the law correctly, interpreted it correctly, including the provision that seems to be raised tonight, including that the Assembly bill that was quoted tonight, just as a correction, AB 2222, was inaccurate. That was the first version of the inclusion of the language that we were discussing. It was further refined 2 years later in a bill that was part of a 3-bill package that I was involved in Sacramento, did expert testimony on, which was AB 2556. Again, I think staff did the correct job on that language. To other things, we've been involved in about 50 of these projects to date, up and down the state, from Sacramento all the way down to San Diego City, Encinitas, Carlsbad, San Marcos, Del Mar, Solana Beach, Orange County, Los Angeles. So we've done a lot of these. We've also been involved in a number of pieces of litigation, either involved as witnesses, experts, and or actually people suing over the misapplication of the law. The courts, including all the way up to the appellate courts now, have done a very strong job of interpreting the law that the legislature has passed and continued to refine over many years now to strengthen density bonus. What I've seen here tonight is unfortunately very typical. It's a tough decision for the policymakers. I understand that. We see it. Actually, sometimes we work for them to help them understand the law and make the right decisions. And in this case, this project seems to have everything in order to be a very highly qualified density bonus project under the law. And in my opinion, it would withstand legal challenge on any side of the ledger. I know I just have a short time here left, so some of the other issues that I know that were addressed tonight, we mentioned safety. Again, there's nothing that we've seen in the record that would indicate that any issues that the project impacts with regard to safety. I've heard geotechnical, I've heard traffic, and I think all the studies that are of record indicate that any impacts that the project may have been mitigated for, which is required by law, and obviously is not a grounds for a denial of the project. We've also heard the historical argument, which, to my knowledge, there's no evidence in the record that there's anything that's actually on the register, and that is very specifically called out for in the law. The calculations that were done, actually, I was involved in AB 2501, where the law was amended to include the terms gross maximum allowed density. Under that interpretation, I believe actually this project could be 34 units, not 28. I think the applicant has worked with staff that I wasn't involved with and took a very conservative approach to what the law actually could have allowed on this project. And then finally, one of the provisions that was added in AB 2501 was to reinforce the legislature's intent on this law, which was subsection R, which reads, this chapter shall be interpreted liberally in favor of producing the maximum number of total housing units. I think that, again, the legislature added that to kind of put an end to the bottom of the law and say, this is needed, we have a housing crisis, approve these projects and move them forward as quickly as you can. Thank you very much, and I'm available for any technical questions that anyone might have. Thank you.
With that, we'll close the public input portion of this hearing. I have a question for staff. Sergio, earlier one of your slides showed if it weren't for the density bonus provisions, if you took out the 40% slopes and the 20% over 50 feet, it left about 3 developable acres, roughly?
Mayor Weiss, yes, that's correct. The generally level mesa area is about 3 acres.
So in the absence of density bonus, how many units in this zoning district could they get
3 acres, 9, 11 units potentially.
Okay, so how do you get from there to, if you could explain how you get from there to the, under the density bonus to the number they're proposing?
Based on the definition of density in our zoning ordinance, which requires us to calculate it at the gross density, we had a slide that explained that calculation.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to make a statement. I understand that the council does have limited discretion as it relates to these density bonus projects. However, I have a concern that the 2 affordable units, and they were described by the applicant as ADUs, are not proportional to the overall project, which is a requirement under both the city's density bonus and inclusionary housing ordinances. I would prefer, understanding the density bonus requirements, that the affordable units be similar to and consistent with the other single-family market rate product, including in the project. And for that reason, I'm going to make a motion that we uphold the Planning Commission's denial of the project without prejudice.
Second. I'll second that motion.
Councilmember Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Staff is very clear in their report that, and they acknowledge that the subject property is inconsistent with a number of general plan land use element policies with regard to the Fire Mountain neighborhood planning area, design compatibility and excellence of design features, and staff would normally not be supportive of a project which fails to comply with such applicable general plan policies. So the only reason, the only reason that we're actually here is because of the state density bonus law. I have had the privilege of getting to know Harriet Bledsoe, spending time in her kitchen, and hearing the history of Friends of Fire Mountain and Fire Mountain, and understanding that there were very, very specific conditions upon which Fire Mountain was actually allowed to be annexed by the city of Oceanside. And it included in our zoning laws that it remain rural and rustic in nature. That's why there are not, the sidewalks. That's why the planning is as it is. It is a wonderful, unique community. And all these years, we have kept that kind of character. So how do we get from there, from where we are now, to back to where we have our own laws? Our own laws would, as the mayor has indicated, lead to a denial of this project and upholding the Planning Commission. We do have the Planning Commission that voted unanimously to deny it. The applicant's representative, one of the things he said was, well, the intent of the legislature, and really why this was done was because of all of us, all of you, all of us, and our comments. Our very, very specific comments that I heard tonight were public safety, very, very specifically public safety. It wasn't about character, and I appreciate everyone sticking to what we needed to hear, and that is that had to do specifically with the state law. State law says city, county, let's say city, shall grant the concession or incentive requested by the applicant unless the city makes a written finding based upon substantial evidence. It's not, it's substantial evidence. It's not, it's not impossible. Substantial evidence of any of the following. The concession or incentive would have a specific adverse impact as defined in paragraph 2 of subdivision D of section 65589.5 upon public health and safety or the physical environment, and for which there is no feasible method to satisfactorily mitigate or avoid the specific adverse impact without rendering the development unaffordable to low income and moderate income households. Okay, so we're talking about the two granny flats, right, which would be the ones for, low affordability. And that section states that a local agency shall not disapprove a housing development project unless it makes written findings based upon a preponderance of the evidence in the record that the housing development project as proposed, would have a specific adverse impact upon the public health or safety, and there is no feasible method to satisfactorily mitigate or avoid the specific adverse impact without rendering the development unaffordable to low and moderate income households. I believe that there is evidence in the record that shows that there are very, very specific public safety issues. What we've heard about traffic issues. Obviously, this is the character, it's rural. Any more addition to, and we're talking about cumulative impacts, would definitely lead to problems in the community. We have 2 schools, and anyone that knows Oceanside and our schools knows that our kids, and we've had kids unfortunately die. One kid on a bicycle, just, barely crossing the street, if we all recall. It is a very difficult time. School districts have basically stopped busing except for very, very special circumstances. And so we have a lot of traffic during these times. And in a place that has the kind of character that we actually support for Fire Mountain, it becomes even more of a public safety risk. The fact that the school district has plans, is considering converting Lincoln Middle from middle school to 6 to 12 to a high school. And high school kids, we're having problems across the street with the parking. So we know that there's going to be even a bigger impact to this community. I heard some information about the slope, the slides, that there were 2 slides previously. I think the biggest issue, though, for me is the traffic issues. And as to our ability to provide and to contribute towards the housing crisis in California, we have always been able to produce a plan for meeting our housing goals, always. This is not part of the plan. This is not part of the plan. The physical environment, historical resources, I understand that there is a very specific language about being registered. I don't think we generally register historic resources like a macadamia a farm. I think that was really meant to talk about historical resources that could be registered like historic homes. But it does call out physical. So I think that we can add that too. So let me just talk a little bit about what Mayor mentioned. I am insulted by the housing that is being produced for the affordable housing portion. I am absolutely insulted. I don't understand, this is disparate treatment. How could you say anything else? How can anybody living in this kind of a unit feel good about living there when they're forced to be different and be treated differently? Because you can tell, who are the people who are living there for affordability. I personally, as someone who lives in Eastside and have dealt with disparate treatment myself as a Latina, as a daughter of an immigrant growing up, I have sought to educate, and I love this community because we celebrate our diversity. We do not try to make people feel badly because they have a different background. It's our servicemen who brought home women from all over the world, decided to stay and live in Oceanside. That is the basis for our diversity from all over the world. I celebrate it. This does not celebrate our diversity. This is an insult. So I do agree with the mayor that, you know, these 3 tiny bedrooms, if they are in fact 3 tiny bedrooms, probably could be 1 or 2, right? But they're trying to make them so tiny. And I tell you that is psychologically so impactful. So I support the motion that we deny this project. I understand that the applicant is probably going to exercise their right to appeal, but I hope together as a community we fight this and we stand on our grounds that this is not acceptable in our community. Thank you.
Councilmember Kern.
Thank you. I want to bring up a couple of things. One, Mr. Lacey brought up, one the applicant brought up. The reason that the state is coming down and doing this is the very reason what's going to happen tonight is that every time we try to build housing, people that have housing don't want any more housing. Now, be careful what you wish for, because this last legislative session, AB 827 barely got defeated. And AB 827, with this proximity to the Sprinter station, by right, they could build 5 stories. By right. The state barely missed doing that. So when we talk about the project down at the bottom of the hill, right across next to the Sprinter station, if that had passed, by right, they can come in and build 5-story buildings. Just because we squeezed housing so tight at the local level, the state is taking that authority away from us. So I don't know what's going to happen in this. I don't support the mayor's motion. I think we could work something out. But be careful what you wish for, because if we keep denying housing, and I wish some of you were here earlier when you saw Dr. Reeser's chart about the housing that's needed and the housing that we're building, we're not even at 10% of what we need to build. Now, I understand everybody here, they have a home. And I bet the people that, I don't care what size the bedrooms are, if they can have a home, they would want a home. So the idea of doing this, somehow that we beat them back, the idea, but we haven't solved the housing crisis. And every time we try to work on it, we get the same thing. Oh, we like the project, but just not here. We're not against housing, but just not here. And actually, we had somebody literally to say tonight, not in my backyard. You know, the idea that we're not against housing, but not in my backyard. At a certain point in time, we have to build housing. The demand for housing is so great here in Southern California. So unless you want your children to live someplace else, we're going to have to deal with the housing crisis. Otherwise, you know, when your kids graduate from high school, buy them bus tickets to Montana, because there's not going to be a place for them to live here. So I know I'm probably not the most popular person in the room right now, but that's reality. Now, obviously, they may bring the legal challenge, and I quite frankly think the law's on their side on this one, you know, reading all the information. So anyway, that's my thoughts. I appreciate everybody coming here. Turn your sign around so I can see it.
It actually says, so build 28 low-income homes.
Yeah, so the idea that, anyway, I appreciate everybody's coming here. I appreciate your passion, but I think we are going to have to solve this. And the problem is local councils do not have the courage to build housing anymore, because the people that are living there now do not want any more housing. So thank you.
Deputy Mayor Lowry.
Thank you, Mayor. So just a little background. We're only talking about a certain aspect of this project. 2 years ago, I voted for an affordable housing project in Oceanside, which was built. At that time, some of the same objections I heard from the council dais were that the people don't want to live there, that the materials are going to be inferior, that the design is disgusting, that kind of thing. So once the project was built, it was 38 homes for working families. It was not just for people who had special needs, which a lot of our housing projects are. So the 38 working families moved into the homes. I went there when they did the ribbon cutting to open it. The families were all in the homes already. And I visited one of the families and I asked them how they liked their pretty compact 2-bedroom home. And the mother, it was a mother, a husband, an adult son, an adult daughter, and a small, nasty chihuahua. And the woman started crying when I asked her how she liked her home, even though it was small. And it looked very nice to me. And I asked the husband how he liked it, and he said, well, the dog's kind of demanding. But the kids were happy that they had a place to live that was really their own home. They said they had been living out of their cars before that. They all had jobs, I think, except for the mom. And we are not talking about that tonight, but we have the same resistance to projects. And I agree with the mayor's objection. I'm going to support his motion, but I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do specifically for this project. It seems very likely that this will come back. It's about 100% likely. But we have to respect that the state, again, has given us new regional housing numbers, and it's not something we as a city can work out. I'm on the board of SANDAG, which is the San Diego Association of Governments. You might have been reading about it. We have this turmoil going on there for the whole county to discuss these numbers the state is bringing down to us and how the state can and probably will enforce those numbers. So it's not a matter of simply going to court, as Mr. Lacey said. It's a matter of observing the laws, doing as much as we possibly can to make housing for people who need the housing, and some of it will be affordable housing, most of it will be market rate housing. So this is a primarily market rate housing project. There are 2 limited income units on it. So we have to, as a community, move forward, make decisions that are smart decisions, not just emotional decisions. That traffic thing there, thanks for bringing that up. If you have issues with that all year round, as I said to a speaker earlier, you have to let the council know. Don't send us ranting emails. Send us rational emails. We forward that information to the staff. We ask the staff to address this. Staff at least gives us an explanation that makes sense to us as council members, and then we ask them to respond to the community. So as far as this is concerned, I don't know how the vote's going to go, but I imagine the project is going to come back, and we as a community are going to have to decide what it is we're willing to accept. There's another project after this. If you want to stick around and see the next one, it's going to take us a couple hours. It's coming up tonight, immediately following this item. So anyway, thank you.
Councilmember Feller.
Thank you. What was the lot size on St. Malo?
Councilmember Feller, I believe the average lot size in St. Malo is about 4,700 square feet, more or less.
Okay. A lot of that traffic, my 2 younger daughters went to Lincoln and Palmquist. Fortunately, they were able to walk to school, or we were able to take them, but the school district cut out busing, so we can't take all the credit for that traffic up there. These lineup of cars, it was never like that 30 years ago. So on the sidewalk, how was that sidewalk laid out? I couldn't make it out, so maybe you could explain the sidewalk that appears on their drawing.
Councilmember Feller, so the graphics depicted sidewalk internal to the project. There will be a sidewalk on one side of the street and a walking path on the other with some other materials. And then the project will improve its own frontage, which is about 80 feet, and will include sidewalk and curb return storm gutters.
Just on their own front?
That's the requirement, yes, sir.
Okay. I think the traffic on that street is probably going to ultimately be something that everybody has to deal with that lives in Fire Mountain, because frankly, I use it at least 2 or 3 times a week, and I don't live anywhere near there now. I spent 10 and a half years in Fire Mountain, and there was, when we were there, downs didn't go through. Things have changed drastically up there, but, and there are a lot of panhandle lots, a lot of people where there is, the housing is set way back. There's 3 or 4 off a driveway. House we lived in was probably 3,500 square feet, and we had a shared driveway, and the rest of where we lived was straight down to Oceanside, or to Skylark down below. So I'm fairly familiar. I think that as was stated by Chuck, that this is probably coming back to us. I did have one question of the developer, the appellant, who would like to be the spokesperson. Anybody?
I'd be happy to.
Okay. Mr. Weiss's suggestion that these houses are not, they don't look like the other, the very low income don't look like the other houses. We approved one project about 16 years ago where they had housing out on Emerald, off of Emerald. And those houses were smaller, but looked similar. So how can you fix that?
Well, first of all, for the record, I'm John Korn. I'm one of the project developers. With all due respect to Mayor Weiss, the proportionality requirement of the density bonus law does not require even a similar square footage. It requires, it's a much lower standard, and our ADUs clearly meet the density bonus standard because of the same number of bedrooms, same amount of parking. And in working with staff, this was the way that it was collectively decided would be the best way to move this forward under the city's density bonus law and under the state density bonus law. So legally speaking, it doesn't need to be fixed, what I guess my answer to your question is. If there was a way to fix it that would make it more palatable, I think we would consider that, but legally I don't think we need to go there. It's sufficient the way it is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Feller.
Well, I'd like to ask you, Mayor, if he was able to fix that or appeal to that, would you be involved? Would you be able to support this?
Well, I think that's something we'd have to look at depending on where the vote goes.
Well, I'm much in agreement with Councilmember Kern that this is a project that I think we need. Ultimately, there's many projects that have we fight over because it's, as Jerry said, yeah, it's a great project, just not here, please. So I'm going to not support the motion on the floor.
Mr. Mullen?
Okay, before you vote, I just wanted to make a couple quick observations. So the motion that was made by the mayor was to affirm the denial of the project without prejudice, which means an application could be received by the city within 12 months, at least after, assuming the motion were to pass. Normally, a project could not be resubmitted in that time period. It could be resubmitted immediately under this motion. But it was based solely on the ground of a lack of proportionality between the accessory dwelling units, which are the two affordable units, and the market rate units based upon the city's density bonus ordinance and the city's inclusionary housing ordinance. That's what I heard the motion to be. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that's the motion that was seconded. So the Planning Commission findings are substantially different than that, and of course the project has changed since it came to the planning, since it was considered by the Planning Commission. So to implement this direction, should this motion be approved, we would need to return to council at your next meeting with revised findings to implement this decision. Again, should it receive a majority approval, and that would have to be done on August 8th. That would not be a new public hearing. It would simply be a non-public hearing item to consider the revised findings based on your direction tonight.
I'd also like my comments to be included having to do with the public safety issues.
I'd have to make her the motion to consider that.
I want to restrict the denial just on the proportionality at this point. Please vote.
Yes, if you want to deny the project.
Motion approved, 3-2. Kernfeller, no.
And just for the record, there was no action taken on the mitigated negative declaration.